From free agency moves to Rashee Rice's car wreck, the draft, preseason roster cutdowns, and key injuries, this video will cover the entire Chiefs 2024 offseason and keep every Chiefs fan in the know about how the roster got to where it's at today. So let's talk about it. But first, how about those? All right, this video has a lot of info packed in it. It's every major move that the Chiefs made from February to the start of the season. Kind of if you checked out during the offseason at any point, this is going to catch you up and get you really in the know of what's going on with the Chiefs roster, new players they added, their draft picks, players who were on the team last year that are no longer with the team this year. It's kind of a deep dive into all that, but we do move quickly. And without further ado, here we go. After the Super Bowl, the Chiefs had some decisions to make, as they do every year. Who stays, who goes? Well, one of the first things they did after winning the Super Bowl was actually letting punter Tommy Townsend, who is now with the Texans, walk in free agency, and instead they signed the punter, the punt god, Matt Araiza, to a cheap one-year deal. He won the starting punter job after mandatory minicamp, and he's the left-footed punter you'll see out there booming 60-plus yarders and place-holding for Harrison Butker on field goals. A week later, at the end of February, the team then released Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the veteran wideout, to save $12 million in cap space, and he's now catching passes from Josh Allen in Buffalo after signing a one-year deal with them this offseason. Next, KC opted to franchise tag cornerback L'Jarius Sneed and ended up trading him before the draft to the Tennessee Titans in exchange for a 2025 third-round pick and a swap of 2024 seventh-round picks. So yeah, I hated to see Sneed go, and honestly, the Chiefs are still looking for some answers at the cornerback position outside of Trent McDuffie, even now as they prepare for the season opener with L'Jarius Sneed gone. After tagging Sneed, though, the Chiefs signed defensive tackle Chris Jones to a massive 5-year extension that made him the highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL, a massive contract. Big numbers. So the Chiefs showed that Chris Jones was priority number one, as he was the first big contract that got done in the offseason. 2 days later, they then re-signed linebacker Drew Tranquill to a 3-year, $19 million deal, who was a free agent, bringing back a couple of key pieces. From there, they slowly but surely brought back more pieces of the defense in the lead up to the draft. They signed safety Deion Bush, who's now on the practice squad, defensive tackle Mike Pennell, defensive tackle Turk Wharton, Derek Nottie, safety/cornerback Nazeeh Johnson, as well as defensive end Mike Dana. Dana inked a 3-year, $24 million deal, which was a big deal. He was the first ever Brett Veach draft pick, any pick since 2018, to re-sign to a long-term deal. They got more re-signed later this season, but more on that in a bit, because before the draft, KC also made several moves on the offensive side of the ball. The notable receiver addition was the speedy Marquise Hollywood Brown. He signed a 1-year deal worth $7 million, and you bring in a guy that Andy Reid will be able to use all over the field, and he runs like a 4.27 40, another smaller-bodied guy, but a quick one nonetheless. And while he sadly suffered a sternoclavicular dislocation on the first play of the first preseason game, he's going to miss Thursday's matchup against the Ravens. Hollywood is looking more likely to play week 2 or week 3 at the latest. Still a great signing, just hopefully he can get out there on the field and stay healthy. Anyway, before the draft, the Chiefs also signed offensive lineman Mike Caliendo and quarterback Carson Wentz to be the backup quarterback for Patrick Mahomes. Caliendo, of course, is a backup lineman that filled in for Joe Thuney all offseason long as he was recovering from his pec injury. But the signing on Carson Wentz, it was a great one in my opinion, because he is probably one of the best backup QBs in the entire NFL. He was a potential MVP candidate the year he got injured, talking about Wentz, the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. So this is a great backup quarterback. Then the Chiefs brought Clyde Edwards-Helaire back on a 1-year vet-min deal, though sadly he's been dealing with some mental health issues, PTSD flare-ups that just recently placed him on the reserve/NFI list. So he's going to miss at least the first 4 weeks of the regular season as things look right now. Another notable signing prior to the draft was a rugby star from Wales that actually left the sport of rugby. He was a rising star in the sport of rugby to pursue his lifelong goal of playing in the NFL. It was always going to be an uphill battle for Louis Rees-Zammit, who has 0 football experience, but many were rooting for him. He was definitely a fan favorite. He didn't survive roster cutdowns, though, getting waived from the team during roster cutdowns, and is now currently signed to the practice squad of the Jacksonville Jaguars. The end of March was an eventful time for the Chiefs because one day after L'Jarius Sneed was officially traded to the Titans and Louis Rees-Zammit was signed This was March 29th. Rashee Rice then made the news when he wrecked his car the very next day on a Dallas freeway, which was March 30th. He reportedly reached speeds of around 119 miles per hour, joyriding, speeding in and out of traffic with him and some friends, and ended up crashing the Lambo that he was renting, with his friend crashing his Corvette that Rashee was reportedly letting him drive. And this led to a multi-car pileup with some injuries. No major injuries from what I understand, but some people are suing him and taking him to court over this. A big kicker here with the Rashee Rice situation is that he and his friends ended up fleeing the scene. They left, and that was definitely not a good look. It's a very long story, one that I've covered in multiple videos, but right now, Rice is facing multiple felony charges with a criminal and civil lawsuit ongoing. The civil case has a jury trial date of June 23rd, 2025, but it's the criminal case that the NFL will be watching closely. There currently isn't a date set for the criminal case, but depending on when results from that come out, Rice could potentially get suspended roughly 4 to 6 games. That's my best guess at this point in time. Sometime this season or next season, depending on how long the criminal case drags out. The NFL recently said they are continuing to keep eyes on the criminal case and see how it plays out, basically before making a verdict of their own. So Rice is good to start the season, but we'll see what happens later down the road. From there, the draft happened, and KC ended up drafting Xavier Worthy, the wideout out of Texas, in the first round, traded up to go and get him. Ironically, traded up with the Buffalo Bills. He's a smaller-bodied guy at 5'11" and 170 pounds, but he's a pretty good route runner, great at tracking the ball down the field, and also ran the fastest 40 time in NFL history, running a 4.21. So Brett Veach made sure to get speed infused back in the wide receiver room. You've got several that can run really fast. Hollywood Brown, 4.27. McCole Hardman, they brought back later, spoiler alert, 4.33. Rice runs a 4.41. Justin Watson runs around a 4.4. Lots of speed back in this offense. Then their second round pick in the draft, if we get back to the draft, was offensive tackle Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU, and he did win the left tackle battle over second-year player Wanye Morris in training camp, and Kingsley will be the starting left tackle to start the season. He's the only new lineman along the O-line, with Joe Thuney just recently back and healthy at left guard. He tore his pec in the playoffs last year and spent most of the offseason recovering and healing up. He's now good to go. Then, of course, you still have Creed Humphrey at center, Trey Smith is right guard, and Jawan Taylor is the right tackle, and hopefully Jawan Taylor has a better year this year with less penalties. He looked much better at the end of last year than he did at the beginning. The Chiefs' next draft pick in the draft, if we get back to it, was tight end Jared Wiley in the 4th round out of TCU. He's a guy that led all FBS tight ends with 5 red zone touchdowns last year. He had a quiet preseason, but I am intrigued to see how he continues to develop, at least his rookie year. The Chiefs' next pick was arguably their steal of the draft, selecting one of the best, if not the best, safety in the entire draft class in the 4th round. That safety is Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. He's a guy that will play a lot of special teams right now, but will rotate in on defense as needed. And he is also going to be one of the next men up if injuries hit the room. He was the standout player to me on defense through the 3 preseason games and is looking to be a staple piece of the defense in future years, and maybe even this year if needed. Then the Chiefs went with an offensive lineman in the 5th round, Hunter Norzad out of Penn State. He's a guy that's played all along the offensive line, literally every spot on the O-line aside from left tackle, and he's shaping up to be the Swiss Army knife type depth piece along the line, kind of like Nick Allegretti used to be. The Chiefs then drafted cornerback Kamal Hadden out of Tennessee in the 6th round, and he's the only draft pick that didn't make the Chiefs' 53-man roster. In fact, the guy is now with the Green Bay Packers on their practice squad. The Chiefs' last draft pick, though, was offensive guard CJ Hansen out of Holy Cross. This is pretty crazy. Hansen is actually the first player from Holy Cross to be drafted since Rob McGovern in 1989, and ironically, it was the Chiefs that drafted McGovern back in 89. So yeah, that is wild indeed. Hansen still needs to develop a bit, but he boasts a relative athletic score of 9.84, and I know KC hopes to keep him around, especially when you have aging guards, or at least one guard on a contract year. Joe Thuney is nearly 32, and Trey Smith is on the last year of his rookie deal, and as of right now, he hasn't reached an extension with the team before the start of the season. So those were the Chiefs' 7 draft picks, with 6 of them still remaining on the active roster. Immediately following the draft, though, KC opted to take care of one of their best players in tight end Travis Kelce. They basically reworked the 2 years he had left on his contract, giving him a raise, and that made him the highest paid tight end in average per year and cash over the next 2 seasons, a well-deserved pay raise for tight end 1 in the entire NFL. A week or so after the draft, the Chiefs signed a bunch of undrafted free agents to help build out their 90-man roster, but the most notable signings were running back Amani Bailey, linebacker Swayze Bozeman, tight end Baylor Cupp, and defensive tackle Fabian Lovett Sr., who are all now on the Chiefs practice squad. Then, a couple UDFAs did make the Chiefs' 53-man roster, with those being cornerback Christian Roland Wallace and running back/fullback, the hybrid, Carson Steele. Carson Steele is probably the biggest offensive standout throughout preseason to me. So you had Jaden Hicks on defense, Carson Steele on offense, and even though he's technically listed on the roster as a fullback, he will be used in more of a hybrid role. Roughly a month later, just before mandatory minicamp, the Chiefs signed veteran wideout Mecole Hardman to a vet min deal, and he's currently looking to be the team's starting punt returner, possibly one of their 2 main kick returners, and will also be used here and there on offense, especially with Hollywood Brown still out and injured. Shortly after that, defensive end B.J. Thompson, the Chiefs' 5th-round draft pick from 2023, had a seizure one morning during a team meeting and actually went into cardiac arrest, had to get rushed to the hospital. He did end up recovering, but is currently on the NFI list as he works through more tests. He seems optimistic he's going to play this season, but we will wait and see what happens there. And that brings us to August, with training camp being in full swing during that time, and that's when the Chiefs made kicker Harrison Butker the highest paid kicker in the entire NFL, signing him to a 4-year, $25.6 million deal that has him averaging $6 million per year. A few weeks later, they did the same for center Creed Humphrey, making him the highest paid center in the NFL by a landslide, resetting the center market. His deal averages out at $18 million APY and is a 4-year, $72 million contract in total. Brett Veach did say they are also in discussions with Trey Smith and his representation on a potential contract extension, but unless a deal gets announced in the next couple of days, I'm not sure one gets announced until the end of the season, or Trey Smith ends up walking in free agency and signing elsewhere. The guard market is insane right now. Linebacker Nick Bolton is the other notable player on a contract year, and I'm not sure he gets extended either, at least before the season starts. They will most likely let him play out the last year of his deal and then talk with him about a new contract after the season is over. From there, some of the most notable moves the Chiefs made during last week's roster cutdowns, getting the roster from 90 to 53, was adding veteran wideout Juju Smith-Schuster, signing him to a 1-year vet min deal. Juju was released earlier in August from the Patriots, and after Hollywood Brown got injured, the Chiefs basically immediately reached out to his agent. Well, he's back now in KC after racking up nearly 1,000 receiving yards in 2022, and will see some playing time this Sunday. He's not going to be the Juju of old, the Juju of 2022, but as the season goes on, he will play a role in this offense as long as he can stay healthy. Then the next day, on August 27th, the Chiefs cut their roster down from 90 to 53, and over the next few days continued making tweaks, moves here or there, both to the practice squad and the 53-man roster. The most notable player that was waived during cutdowns was probably wide receiver Kadarius Toney, the former first-round pick that the Chiefs traded for from the Giants. Well, he's now a free agent and recently had a visit with the Seattle Seahawks, but that's all the Toney news we have for now. Wish him the best in his next chapter. Justin Ross was also waived, wide receiver Justin Ross, but is now at the Chiefs practice squad, as was wide receivers Nico Remigio and Montrell Washington, both waived and now on the practice squad. Cornerback Nick Jones, same thing with him. Then the Chiefs signed veteran running back Samaje Perine late last week. This is the most notable signing here that happened just a few days ago. This is a 1-year deal worth up to $1.5 million. And this is important because Clyde Edwards-Helaire had been dealing with mental health issues all offseason long, and as I said earlier in this video, got placed on the reserve/NFI list, and that left the depth in the running back room questionable, to say the least, after Isaiah Pacheco, and then you had the rookie UDFA Carson Steele. And believe it or not, but Samaje Perine will suit up and play against the Ravens, even though he just got here. I'm not sure how much he's going to play, but he's a running back that is kind of the new Jerick McKinnon, who is still a free agent. He will come in talking about Perine on third downs and pass protect for Mahomes, as well as catch passes out of the backfield. That is what he is very good at doing. And that brings us to the here and the now. And yes, I know, that was a piss ton of info all at once. So what I'm going to show you here on screen is a few graphics that recap everything in a clear and concise manner. I want to start with the most notable players that were on the roster last year that signed with another team. That's MVS. He's now with the Bills, as is safety Mike Edwards, also in Buffalo. Tommy Townsend is punting for the Texans. Nick Allegretti signed a couple-year deal. You'll see it up on screen with the Commanders. Then one of the guys I really wanted to see was linebacker Willie Gay Jr. return, but he signed a deal with the Saints. He also joined former Chiefs players Tyrann Mathieu and Colin Saunders. And finally, L'Jarius Sneed was then, of course, traded to the Titans. As for the players that were on the team in 2023 that ended up re-signing with the Chiefs this offseason, those were defensive tackle Chris Jones, massive deal, wide receiver McCole Hardman, vet min deal, linebacker Drew Tranquill to his 3-year deal, running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on a vet min, defensive tackle Turk Wharton, long snapper James Winchester, Derek Nottie also signed 1-year deals. Then Mike Dana signed a multiple-year deal. Love to see that. Safety Nazeeh Johnson, linebacker Jack Cochran, and offensive guard Mike Caliendo were also re-signed. Then the most notable Chiefs players that are currently no longer with the team and are still free agents are as follows. Wide receiver Kadarius Toney, left tackle Donovan Smith, swing tackle Prince Tega Wanogho, running back Jerick McKinnon, tight end Blake Bell, QB Blaine Gabbert, and wide receiver Richie James, but I just like to say Rick James. Then the players added who were not on the team last year was Juju Smith-Schuster, running back Samaje Perine, wide receiver Marquise Hollywood Brown, quarterback Carson Wentz, defensive end Cameron Thomas. The Chiefs traded for him around cutdown day last week. And finally, tight end Peyton Hendershot, whom the Chiefs also traded for from the Cowboys around cutdown day. From there, the Chiefs reached extensions or pay raises with several key players that were already on the roster, but were on contract years, aside from the guy who got the pay raise, which was Travis Kelce. The two who reached extensions were Harrison Butker and Creed Humphrey. All in all, the Chiefs brought back key pieces on defense, a lot of familiar faces there, with the D-line largely looking the same as last year. Last year's first-round draft pick, though, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, has been underperforming, in my opinion. No real flashes during preseason, and while he is healthy, he looks like he still needs more time to develop, and that's also why they traded for defensive end Cameron Thomas from the Cardinals. FAU is going to rotate in from time to time early on this season, but hopefully we see more from him. Then, of course, George Karlaftis is still here, entering year 3 in the system, and he's a guy I think could have a real breakout year, even more so than last year, with Chris Jones still getting a lot of attention in the middle of the line. Another thing to note is that defensive end Charles Omenihu will return this season. He tore his ACL last year deep in the playoffs and is starting out the season on the PUP list, but should return sometime after the Chiefs' bye week. They're saying maybe sometime around November. Then, while Willie Gay Jr. is gone, they still do have Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquill, and Leo Chenal out there. The secondary is still probably the biggest question mark to me, at least the cornerback room. As they battle for that cornerback 2 spot, you have several players in the mix. Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, who had offseason shoulder surgery on his labrum and recently did return. He's going to be rusty, but he is definitely in the mix, as well as Nazeeh Johnson, who's rehabbing back and fully cleared from that ACL repair after tearing it last year's training camp. But nobody so far out of these guys has stepped up to fully claim that cornerback 2 spot just yet. You still have Trent McDuffie, the former first-round pick, holding it down, and he's going to be one of the staples in that room for sure. The safety room is largely the same as well, aside from the newly drafted Jaden Hicks. Justin Reed is entering the last year of his deal with the team, but sadly missed all of training camp with a quad injury. He's back now and ready to go, though. Brian Cook is also back and healthy after badly injuring his ankle last year in the regular season. Then Shamari Connor is looking primed for a solid year after a decent rookie campaign last season. Then for the offensive side of the ball, Isaiah Pacheco will definitely be the primary running back. He's looking great, a little bit lighter this year, has worked with the wide receiver coach. A lot of good things there for Pacheco. The UDFA rookie Carson Steele will most likely be in there blocking as a fullback and getting some short yardage handoffs as needed, with Samaje Perine being the back that comes in during key plays in the red zone as well as third downs. The wide receiver room had a pretty decent buff, a revamp, if you will, and while I am excited to see the newly added Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Hollywood Brown when he gets healthy, I am also excited to see Rashee Rice. He is the wide receiver to watch for me. He had an awesome training camp, arguably the best of any receiver out there, and might be the guy that leads the room in receiving yards if he doesn't end up getting suspended. Then if I pivot to the tight end room, Travis Kelce is looking as healthy as ever as he gears up for year number 12. Noah Gray is on a contract year, but should see some on-the-field action per usual. And then we will see what Jared Wiley's role ends up looking like during his rookie year. The newly traded for Peyton Hendershot, tight end 4 on the roster, will largely be used on special teams right now. Then the offensive line is looking very solid, with the only question mark being how will the rookie Kingsley Suamataia be looking early on this year as he aims to protect the blind side of Patrick Mahomes. Didn't even talk about Patrick Mahomes, but he's been looking great per usual. Training camp, throwing darts, no looks, behind the back passes in preseason games. He's definitely good to go, fully healthy as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your crash course, your entire overview of the Chiefs offseason to get you caught up on what you need to know to start the 2024 NFL season. So until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?